My name is Marie Cook. I'm a GIS specialist with New Jersey Forest Fire Service. And so I'm here today because I started my career as a part-time employee with New Jersey Forest Service, and I kind of came into it right at one of the booms of Southern Pine Beetle suppression. And so I have a little bit to add to the discussion today about that. And luckily, with the exposure I gained with the Forest Fire Service so far, I'm getting a bit better versed at some of the fire implications of these outbreaks. And so just a little bit of an overview, because not all of us are very familiar with Southern Pine Beetle, especially up here in the north where it's a pretty new issue. So Southern Pine Beetle is a bark beetle native to the southeastern United States. I'm a map person, and so we're talking about life history. I had to put the obligatory range map up there. You can see that its range does extend from Arizona down through Mexico and Central America as well. So the beetle feeds on bark of living tissue beneath the bark, and while it does so, it introduces a lethal blue stain fungus. And so this fungus effectively chokes the tree out and limits nutrient and water flow to the tree. The beetle usually sticks to attacking stress trees, and where we have a lack of management, fire exclusion, compounded by drought stress, this really helps the beetle to gain traction and cause these landscape scale outbreaks. And so here it's a little bit washed out on the screen, but you can see the brighter pictures where I have the arrows pointing to the active heads, and that's where the beetles are actively reproducing in the trees. And then you can see the vacated trees, those brownish gray top trees, and that's really where the big fire hazard lays because of how desiccated the trees are. And so prior to 2001, a lot of people didn't think that New Jersey was within the natural range of Southern Pine Beetle, but there was an outbreak last reported before 2001 in 1939. And so it's believed that these compounding factors, the drought stress, and the fire exclusion and lack of management in our forests, along with maybe the help of interstate commerce, brought the beetle to New Jersey and were attracted to areas that were especially affected by the drought, like low-lying pine and low-lying areas. And so a consultant forester in 2001 noticed what he believed to be Southern Pine Beetle in a private woodlot that he was managing, and gave the Forest Service a heads up. The Forest Service, New Jersey Forest Service and U.S. Forest Service both confirmed the detection, and from there they got right up in the air with the help of Forest Fire Service in New Jersey, their aviation resources, and they got up there and said, holy cow, this stuff is everywhere. And so, they reached out to the U.S. Forest Service for assistance. They ramped up their detection. U.S. Forest Service helped with that with reported aerial flights and helped establish a monitoring system. I know a lot of the forest pest folks here are way too familiar with those funnel traps that you can see up at the top right of the screen. And so, luckily, we were able to bid out some sites for salvage cuts to treat some of the larger areas where it was merchantable for contractors to come in and cut. And then our full-time Forest Service staff, like really small staff, would go out and control the smaller sites, just Sawyer crews. And so you can see the picture, like the diagram of a cut and remove. And so the idea is you would leave the standing dead because they no longer pose a threat. You would leave them standing. And then you would fell the active trees, and you would actually fell a buffer around the active trees of uninfested trees as a precautionary measure. And so the rule of thumb is you would cut a buffer as wide as the tallest tree is tall. 100 feet is a little bit generous for New Jersey pines, but that was typically the measurement that we used. And so there's a little bit of a lull after that big boom in 2001 and the years following, and we got complacent and we stopped looking for it because it wasn't an issue for a little while. And in 2010, record temperatures compounded by another drought caused another boom. And so the Southern Pine Beetle range was able to expand, and the areas where Southern Pine Beetle infested pine trees, the damage became more extensive in those areas. In 2010 alone, 14,000 acres were affected. And it was around this time that the United States Forest Service warned that we could have lost 80% of our pine trees within 10 years if we took no action. And so you can see a quote that I highlighted here. It's actually from a very recent article from the Washington Post. But Matt Ayers, a Dartmouth professor and researcher who has effectively helped write the book on Southern Pine Beetle Management, said it may not be too long before people are driving through the Pinelands saying, why do they call it the Pinelands? And so when I first joined this project, that was very much the sentiment that, our Pinelands were going to be gone. And luckily that's not the case. A few things really played into that. We really lucked out with some cold winters. But the heart of the Pinelands was treated so frequently with prescribed fire and experienced wildfire so often that a lot of these compounding stressors that were existing in the low-lying areas that didn't get burned, in the areas that did get prescribed burn, we didn't see a lot of pine beetle activity. And when we did, it was really very small and never really gained much steam. And so you can see that sentiment in the Philadelphia Inquirer headline there at the bottom, New Jersey Southern Pine Beetle outbreak is nation's worst, really captures that. And so this basically is where I came in. So New Jersey Forest Service got funded from from the U.S. Forest Service, and we formed a task force. And so the task force was not only New Jersey Forest Service folks, but Forest Fire Service folks as well. And so while the foresters brought technical knowledge and, most importantly, the experience of having done this before, this wave of 2010 outbreaks, there was a lot of new staff. And so those few key folks that were around back in 2001 were really important in making sure we didn't reinvent the wheel. We knew what worked and didn't work before. And that really helped to drive detection, suppression planning, and monitoring. And so that's where I fit in. I was an hourly, and I went out and ground truth. And I took the GIS data from their flights and made site maps and marked boundaries and showed contractors the sites and checked up on Sawyer crews, making sure that the infestations were controlled by their activities. And then New Jersey Forest Fire Service provided aviation resources for detection. Project managers were really well versed at managing really multifaceted tasks and a lot of resources at once. So those fire guys are the best players in that role. And then of course the Sawyer crews, who at the end of the day are the ones that got the work done. And you can see the top right picture. They're like three of the main guys that were always out there through the icy winters and swampy summers with tons of ticks and briars. And it's pretty cool that one of the guys who worked on that crew is full-time now. And so we kind of came up through it together, and that's really neat. One thing that was kind of hard was coordinating all these different contractors, and there are multiple Forest Fire Service Sawyer crews. And so we really had to get everything, and I worked on an hourly basis, and so I wasn't there every day. And so we really needed a way to put everything in one place, make everything easy and accessible for everybody. So that's, it's kind of like an arts and crafts project up on a bulletin board, but that board really helped to organize. So if I wasn't in, and David and the fire guys, they were ready to move on to the next site, they came in, looked in their folder, and pulled out the next site map to go to. So that really helped to streamline things. And so from 2010 to 2014, we really were on the ball. We were able to catch up with the help of nature, of course. So the dedicated forest, the Sawyer crews were dedicated to nothing but Southern Pine Beetle. And the same thing with me and my colleague. That's the only thing that we were responsible for. And so we were able to really have a quick turnaround from when these spots were detected during the flights to getting on the ground truthing, marking for suppression, and getting our crews out there. It took a little bit longer when we were contracting sites to be cut, the larger sites. But for the most part, our turnaround was really quick. And this was most important in the summer months when the outbreaks can grow pretty fast. So the predator beetle, the checker-declared beetle populations were able to build because they had such a great abundant food source for a while the pine beetle was ramping up. And we lucked out with the winters. We saw multiple consecutive days of single-digit nights, and that's really what it takes to kill the overwintering populations beneath the bark and really curb the emergence in the spring. And so that brings us right up to today. So in New Jersey, as those cold winters in the interior of the state kept the populations down, along the coast where that winter weather was moderated, the Southern Pine Beetle kind of traveled up the coast and is now your problem. Sorry, guys. And so you can see some headlines, Long Island in 2014. The back right headline, that was actually a Norway spruce that was found in Connecticut. And then you can see the positive detections on Cape Cod, those red dots in the front. And so we're all here today, because we have a lot in common. And so it's not just a forestry issue when it comes to dealing with Southern Pine Beetle. And so there are certain considerations for wildfire management that are really important to keep in So it may seem really obvious, standing dead trees are a hazard, and we want to stay away from them. But the standing dead trees and the slash laying in the woods from the cut and leave treatments, they really kind of force an indirect attack. And this was exactly what happened in 2014 wildfire, that the ignition was actually in a gypsy moth kill area, and then the fire moved into a Southern Pine Beetle affected area. And there was no way to get a plow in to cut control lines because of all the slash. And so they were forced to, go out to big roads and make the box bigger and manage the fire that way. So a really thick layer, you have to imagine all the needle casts coming off of these trees. And so even if there isn't a ton of ladder fuels available, the thick layer of really flashy fuel can almost cause the ladder effect to facilitate that movement from the surface to the ground. The climate in these sites, wide open, of course they're going to be hotter and drier when those conditions exist already in our fire season. And it can increase the ignition probability of those sites. Something else that we notice is those fire-adapted shrubs like blueberry and huckleberry can really take off in some sites depending on how it was treated, how much slash was left. And that also does contribute to the fire intensity. And then talking about prescribed burning, just like the slash impeded, direct attack during wildfire suppression, it also impedes prescribed burn site prep. And so we use a tractor plow to cut down the mineral soil and cut plow lines through burn units. And instead of being able to do that, we had to adjust how large our units would typically be in that area, and again, build a bigger box. And so not only did the slash impede the site prep, but fire spread as well, and that's kind of a no-brainer. It's kind of hard for fire to carry when you have big logs laying in the way. And so you can see on the left-hand side of the picture in the forefront there, the tree's completely uncharred. That oak trunk is still nice and light, and everything around it has been charred. So that just shows how patchy it can be where the slash lies. I know, unpredictable winds they're always a factor that you consider when you're conducting a prescribed burn. But these wide open areas can really cause unpredictable turbulence. And jackpot fuels can cause erratic fire behavior. So that picture, the top picture with the smoke. So that was a site that was affected by Southern Pine Beetle back in, I believe, 2012, and was prescribed burn this season. And so some long-term effects of Southern Pine Beetle that also have, ecological, forestry, and fire management implications is that we're seeing that the regeneration varies with the treatment method. And so areas where we had mechanical work done, we had these large-scale logging operations, we have skid trails, and we had skidders tearing up the root mat and causing a lot of disturbance. And it's in those sites where we have the really thick pine regeneration. And if you're familiar with pine ecology, then this is no surprise to you. And then, so that's kind of what you see. It's really hard to see on the screen. So in that bottom picture, in the background, that's all just a sea of really thick pine regeneration. And then the picture on the top, that is a picture where a cut and leave was performed. And so you see there's barely any pine going on in that photo at all. And so we're really seeing, I'll jump to the next bullet down, I'll skip one. We're really seeing some stand conversion. And so areas where Southern Pine Beetle started in the drainages in the low-lying pine and moved its way upland, we're seeing the maples take over, we're seeing sweet gum take over, and then the oaks and the uplands. So these treatments are not, so left untreated or treated, we're still, the Southern Pine Beetle is still creating disturbance. And so you're left with this mosaic, right? We all love that word, mosaic, across the landscape. And so you're left with this patchwork of gaps. And that could be good or bad depending on what you're managing for or what the critter, that you really think is important and you're trying to help out is. But it leaves a lot of opportunities for habitat management. And so in this area, in the satellite picture you see, that's actually a picture of a wildlife management area. And you can see feed strips on the periphery. And the folks that are responsible for managing that land are really interested in us using prescribed fire to keep some of that early successional habitat and that young forest for their small game. And so when it comes down to it, wildfire prevention is Southern Pine Beetle prevention. So the thinning that we do to create fuel breaks promotes overall healthy trees and healthy forests and lowers the susceptibility of the pines to pine beetle. Prescribed burning lessens competition for water and nutrients by eliminating the understory growth. And so, we believe that, and there's no science or data to this. This is just what we notice when we're out and about, that the prescribed burning does help lessen the vulnerability to Southern Pine Beetle. And community preparedness messaging goes a long way. And so this is something that the fire community is really, really good at, right? We have fire-wise communities, we have community wildfire protection plans, we have Ready, Set, Go program, all of these things that we've engaged really closely with our communities. And in New Jersey, a lot of the communities that we engage with in this way, they're all active retirement communities. And so these folks are our voices, they're our eyes and our ears, So I was asked to give a Southern Pine Beetle talk at one of the Firewise days, and I had like 3 other requests. As soon as I gave that talk, to go out and do more talks about Southern Pine Beetle, because they all talk and everything. And so I think that is like a really undervalued resource. Are those communities and that population of folks who is already engaged in preparedness planning. And so if you tackle on Southern Pine Beetle and make it relatable to fire and fire preparedness, and it really makes it relevant. And so what's next? So in 2019, we applied for a landscape scale restoration grant and got it. And so what we're going to be doing is working on rehabilitating pest-plagued forests. So areas where the canopy has been lost due to pest damage, we're going to use prescribed fire to look into the effects on managing invasive species. And so in a lot of the pine beetle sites, we're really just looking at Japanese silkgrass, maybe Phragmites in some spots. And up north, where we have mostly an oak component, we're looking to treat areas with barberry, things like that. I think that's all I have. Any questions? Oh, that's great. Thank you.